With Cristiano, we did a shoot with him in Madrid. Very, very professional. You know, you might get literally sort of 30 minutes with them. He's not going to give you any minutes extra, and he's not going to be super animated, but he knows what it is to be professional, to turn up, to do what he needs to do. I was with Nike for 10 years. I wrote a book called The Anti-Blueprint Project during COVID. Everyone had a project, that was mine. If you look at people like LeBron James, Cristiano Ronaldo, there is no way to play 24 years at the top level unless you really commit and you're like, I am going to be at the top of my game for this many years. They have that thing built in their head where they have to win. You really have that feeling of like, well, I haven't achieved anything with my life. Like, what am I doing with my life? And because as you say, there's someone younger than you, smarter than you, better look, like, doesn't matter. The problem in general is we always compare ourselves upwards and we never look down.
Hi, John. So thank you so much for taking the time and being here, coming to the Naked Thoughts podcast. So in general, to give you some bit of a context, Naked Thoughts is a community of creators, freelancers, entrepreneurs at the early stage. Yeah, who want to create something meaningful and are facing like practical and mental challenges. And I want to invite people who can give valuable advice to those kind of people who are facing those challenges.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you again. And I want to start with, I did some research and already, of course, we knew each other a bit, but you're a founder, you're a creator, you're a writer, you're a manager, you're a leader, you're so many things, you're an author. If we strip that all away, who is the person behind all of that?
That's a great question. Yeah, normally that's not a question that people ask because, as you say, people are normally like, what's your role? What do you do? If you strip everything away, I am someone who is a dad, father of 2 kids, someone who's extremely passionate about sport, especially snowboarding, surfing, I guess running now, and someone who likes to improve as he goes, I suppose you could say. I don't know. I don't have a succinct way of saying it, but I think that's what you could say about me.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm English. I've lived in the US, Austria, now Portugal, France for a little bit, and Finland for a little bit. So a citizen of the world, I would like to think.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe you can give us a quick intro of, I mean, you already said where do you come from, but what are you doing? Your journey?
Yeah. So I suppose I can, if we start where we are today. So I work for a brand called DB. DB is a luggage backpack travel brand based out of Scandinavia. So I've been with them for around 4 years now. I lead the marketing team with them. Very, very young, very fun team, going places, gives me a lot of energy and means I get to travel to Scandinavia a lot, which is really nice. Previous to that, I was with Nike for 10 years. The majority of that time, I got the fortunate chance to work in the world headquarters in Portland in Oregon, which was phenomenal because, you know, if you're a fan of sport, you get to, the campus has, I don't know, 4 or 5 different gyms. It has football pitches, swimming pools, basketball courts, tennis courts, yoga, whatever you want. It has all different restaurants, coffee shop. I mean, the campus is around 15 to 18,000 people. So it's like a small city. I was there, as I say, for nearly 10 years and got to work with some amazing people, meet a lot of great friends. Before that, I worked in Austria. I worked at Burton Snowboards. That was my first, I would say, first or second real job, which was very good because it also made me, well, it's where I met my wife. It's where I learned to speak German. And importantly educated me about how it is to be someone who's giving meaningful input to the work environment. Along the way, I wrote a book, as you said. So I wrote a book called The Anti-Blueprint Project during COVID. Everyone had a project, that was mine. I also helped start a alcoholic kombucha brand here in Portugal with some friends. And before that, I also wrote for various magazines and other things. So foot in a lot of pies, but that's where you find me today, as you could say.
Well, after that, we will deep dive into some of your projects.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, I want to start with something different because I recently read your article on Substack about the over optimization culture,
Yeah.
which was really interesting to read. And
Yeah.
in the article, you said something that really resonated with me, and I'm going to read it now. And you wrote, if you don't have a life figured out at 26, with a six pack, loads of money, your own apartment, sleeping 8 hours a day, after making sweet perfect love to your partner, then waking up for an ice bath and smashing out an half marathon, it can feel you are failing at life. I read that and I thought, yeah, it's so fucking true nowadays. Especially when you, I don't know, you go on Instagram or already LinkedIn nowadays.
Yeah.
There are, yeah, lots of founders, Forbes under 30,
Yeah.
writers, speakers, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I have the feeling oftentimes I do really feel like I'm behind and I'm not doing enough. And it was really interesting to read your Substack letter on this. So my question is, should we even try it then? Should we like try to do more, or what's the sweet spot, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I think some of that is knowing when to switch off the external analysis. So for example, I think I wrote that after I'd been sick. I had the flu.
Mhm.
And I remember going on Instagram and LinkedIn, as you say, on a Sunday, lying in bed. And you really have that feeling of like, well, I haven't achieved anything with my life. Like, what am I doing with my life? And because, as you say, there's someone younger than you, smarter than you, better look, like, doesn't matter. I think the problem is, and I think it's the same in sport as well, the problem in general is we always compare ourselves upwards and we never look
Yep.
down. And I would say that's the same for many high performing people. And you can take this all the way. So, for example, it's easy to look at a Premier League footballer who's complaining they don't get paid enough money and they earn 100,000 a week, because they're looking at the player who gets 200,000 a week. And that player is looking at the next one is looking at the captain who gets 300 a week. That football player is then looking at Cristiano Ronaldo and saying, yeah, but he gets 1 million a week. And then Cristiano is looking across to LeBron going, but he gets 2 million a week. And then he looks at the baseball player who gets 4 million a week. And at the end of it all, it's like, if you're the guy who plays for Crystal Palace and you earn 100 grand a week, guess what? Your life's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
If you were to look down the football pyramid the other way, you'd realize like how many millions of people play football just for fun, and you'd be very happy with your life. So I think to your question, we should try and we should look for inspiration where we can. But I think what has happened is podcasts, books, YouTube, everything, it's become such an overload. And if you let yourself get sucked into it, you can just consistently be in a spiral of, I need to do more, I need to do more, I need to do more. And it's good to be able to learn where we can improve, but at the same time, knowing the chances are we're doing quite okay. And it's okay to have a day off. It's okay to sleep in. It's okay, have a beer and enjoy the sunset.
Yeah.
I think it's just as you get older, knowing what to do and when. Like, so for example, one thing I've started doing, I'm trying to do it today, is not look at my phone on a Sunday. Just leave it
Really?
switched off and see if I can do it. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting because all of a sudden the day goes a lot slower. You don't get interrupted. You can just do your projects. And I think it's good for us. So
You also mentioned that like young people now have, many of them at least, have a much more healthy lifestyle. They drink less, they practice more sports, eating healthier.
yeah.
And you also said that for those kind of people, they should not fall into that kind of trap of over optimizing their lives because success will come anyway. What do you mean by that?
I think I mean by that is a lot of the young people that I see, again, who are leading healthy lifestyles, who are working at companies, starting their own businesses, they're probably doing already enough that if they think about the long term, 20 years from now, they're probably already on a good path. So the example, the passage you wrote, I mean, I really didn't start working till I was like 25, 26. And I work with a lot of people who already at 25 have 3 or 4 years good experience. they maybe bought a house. And so, if you multiply that forward 20 years, they're going to be in great shape.
Yeah.
I think the young generation are doing very well with that. But again, as long as they can control the sort of external inputs that they get.
For you personally, was there a moment where you realized that something you were optimizing didn't actually matter for your happiness or success?
I don't know if there was a single thing. I think probably the best thing when it comes to this culture that I ever did was realize that it was a problem. So when I worked at Nike, I definitely struggled a bit with comparing yourself to others.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of specific examples. There was a woman I worked with, and I thought I was doing quite well at the company, and I was 35 and here in like mid-level, and then this girl came in who was 25, super good looking, already 2 or 3 levels above me. And yeah, similar. I was like, oh, like I'm never gonna be in charge of this company. I'm never gonna do this. And again, if you look only upwards, for sure, it's like, yeah, you see the other people's feet. But if you look downwards, you think, okay, like it's pretty good. So I think for me, part of that was actually leaving Nike, because when you're in a place like Nike, you're just surrounded by lots and lots of very hungry people, which is great. You need that. You need to be in like a good environment. But it's also at times good to get out of that environment to remind yourself, when you leave a company like Nike and then you go to talk to other brands, they're like, wow, you did that? Wow, crazy. And sometimes you get so used to it, you take it for granted. And I think that's the thing. You should never take these things for granted.
Also, I wrote another article for you on Substack where you were talking about the differences between being great and being good.
Mm.
As you worked many years in sports and with brands, and I guess you've met a lot of athletes along the way. My question would be for you now: when do you think about those people, what exactly differentiates the good from the great?
It's probably hard to put it into a succinct paragraph, but I will try. So I found, if we think about sport, I found that there's probably 3 levels of people, like athletes, let's say. You have the sort of people making their way, coming up in the world, progressing. Then you have the established group who maybe think that they've already made it or they should be higher than they are. And then you have the group who got to, let's call it stage 2. And then they really focused and said, you know what, I'm going to be the very, very, very best of this. And I think if you look at people like LeBron James, Cristiano Ronaldo, these guys are, Ronaldo is 42 now. He's been playing Champions League for, I think, 24 years now. He's going to go to his next World Cup. He doesn't have to play. And it's funny because people often mock, like, he's always with his 6-pack and he's this, that, and the other. But I'm like, there is no way to play 24 years at the top level unless you really commit and you're like, I am going to be at the top of my game for this many years. And the same is true for LeBron. Like, you see the amount of work LeBron does in the mid of his career in terms of strength, all these things, and then more recently, health and wellness. And I think that's just commitment to, okay, I want to be known as one of the greats. So I think it's a physical commitment. And then I think B, there is a mental desire to win commitment, which I don't know if you can learn. It's an intriguing one because my son, for example, is playing football at the moment and he's 10 years old. And there's some kids you see who turn up on the football pitch at 7 years old and they have that thing built in their head where they have to win.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I think that's the thing. You just see some athletes who have this thing where they're like, no, I'm never, ever going to settle to be second place. I will. And I think a lot of the times it comes from people who are coming from underprivileged backgrounds. I always think, like, a lot of people don't like him as a player, but Luis Suarez, for example, who played at Liverpool and Barcelona, and he got banned for many games time and time again for biting people, fighting, da da da. But the thing is, you see when he plays, like, he will do anything to win the game. Like, it doesn't matter. He's like, if I have to bite this person, break their leg, I will run through the wall to win. And so I think it's the combination of that. It's having the sort of mental understanding of, okay, I need to look after my body physically to be great. And at the same time, mentally have this desire to win. And I would say it's probably the same when it comes to the work environment. Understanding what do you need to do for your, I guess, for your brain in order to function properly. So, understanding what time do you need to get up? What sport do you need to do? Like, what conditions do you need to be good when it comes to work? And having that tenacity to not just say, okay, I've got a job and I'm just going to sit here and pick up the paycheck every Friday. It's the tenacity to say, no, I'm going to try and build something, work my way up the company, or do something different.
Do you think this winning mentality comes natural, or is it something that you can also learn?
I think it comes from your environment. So I think if you look at the US, the numbers of entrepreneurs and then the amount of wealth creation in the US, I think is because they don't have a social safety net. People know you can't just go to university and then get a job and live okay. Like in Europe, cost of living is still okay within reason. In the US, it's, if you lose your job, you lose your insurance and you're 1 or 2 steps away from living on the high street outside of the store. And I think because of that, it instills a desire to win in people that is just that they really have to go for it. So I think it's more of I think some people have it. As I say, some kids when they show up to play football can already have it. There's other kids who don't have it, but they can learn it if they are in the right environment, I would say.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that safety net you mentioned. We have here in Europe. On the other hand, I think it's also like it's so tough, so much more complicated here in Europe to found something. Also from legal perspectives, from financing perspectives. I think we are way behind here, unfortunately.
It's interesting to me because in the US, my wife had a business where she was importing Korean kids clothes and reselling. All you need to do, you set up a Shopify account where you register your business, and then at the end of every year, you just file whatever TurboTax online, you pay your taxes, off you go. In places like Portugal, for example, where it's, bureaucracy is still a Olympic sport, to set up a business, to file your tax, like everything takes so long. And I think it's the same in a lot of Europe. And if you want to encourage entrepreneurs and you want to make people do things, you have to make it as easy as possible so there is as little legislation or bureaucracy to deal with, and then also provide tax incentives because,
of course,
in the US, the way the tax structure works between, deductions for charitable donations, deductions on the car you buy, like they do make it very, very easy.
No, I have the feeling here in Europe, you get punished for, like from a tax perspective, oftentimes, because if you're in a good salary, then okay, you are freelancing or doing something apart, you still got you're in the highest bucket to be taxed, and then you from the additional income, you pay more of the half to the government.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge, and you're seeing the problems now in the UK, like the number of millionaires who are leaving the UK every year. And I think it's really going to be a problem because they estimate 10,000 millionaires are leaving the UK every year, and the majority of those people, I guess, are people who are starting businesses, employing other people, etc. My father is always very animated about this because he left school at 16. He went to work in the bank. He worked there till he was 42. He started his own business, took a lot of risks. So obviously paid very good tax while he was at the bank, started his own business, took a lot of risk. So was paying, 40% tax for 20 years, sold his business, had to pay another 40% tax on the capital gains of the business. And then, if he passes away tomorrow, the inheritance tax in the UK is the threshold's very low, and they'll take 40% again, and it just gets to the point where I think and he says quite openly, he's like, I wouldn't start a business again in the UK now because the incentives have been taken away so much that there is
Yeah.
just so much paperwork, and it really creates do you want to take the risk that you could bankrupt yourself? So I think that's the challenge.
Coming back to the topic of um, good and great,
Yeah, yeah,
and applying it to our lives, what do you
yeah.
think? Or what kind of habits should we then? Of course, it's always depending on the on each person itself, but what kind of habits would you recommend to implement to personal daily life in order to become great?
Since we just had the Christmas holiday, spending time to reflect over the holidays, goal setting, being honest with yourself about your progress in the year before. I would say that's a very good way every year to just, take the temperature. Are we moving in
Mm,
the right direction? And then the other thing that I really have found the last few years is kind of finding a few people in your life who you can call and have very honest, real conversations. If you come to a junction in your career, you get offered a new job, you lose a job, you want to start a business, that you can have a few people on your team that you can call and just, hey, I've got this thing. What do you think? And it can be for you to them or vice versa. And I have a few people like that, and quite often it's people that you're maybe not super close to, like not best friends. It's almost
yeah.
easier if it's two steps removed, so you can talk openly about money and you can talk openly about relationships and things like this. So I think it's probably, for me, that's been the two things that I find the most helpful. Um, Being honest with yourself, setting goals, and then having a few people who can actually tell you, some honesty.
Have you ever thought about having founding your own business?
It's funny because I suppose because also my father started his own businesses, I always have it in there that I should,
Hmm.
and it seems like a thing that I should. But I suppose whenever I've been on that stage of, okay, maybe now I should start a business, another interesting opportunity has come along. And, with the kombucha brand we have, I was part of it when we started. I still am part of it, but I've reduced my work and the equity that I have in the business primarily because I think the stage that business is in probably requires a different skill set to what I have.
Yeah.
Like that requires being very good at going around trying to find financing, etc. So I sort of moved myself to a project with DB, which is a little bit more, I think, suited to my skill set. So I thought about it, um, but I haven't gone after it in terms of starting my own business.
You didn't?
I mean, the kombucha brand, there was four of us. I wrote a book, but I didn't really start my own,
Okay.
you know, I don't think there's anything where I can say like, oh, I started this business and.
Last question to the topic of becoming great.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you worked with so many athletes. Um, who was your favorite, and how was it working with Cristiano and also with Erling Haaland?
Who is okay? So I'll start first. Who is my favorite? My favorite was probably Sage Kotzenberg, who won the Olympics in 2014. Um, he has probably been my favorite because I started working with him in 2010 or 2011. So we worked together for 3 years before he won the Olympics. And we started, I think he was probably 16 or 17 when we started working together. And so we had a very good relationship before that.
Yeah.
But I was also able to give him some advice as to, hey, if your career goes well, these are the things you need to do. And a lot was in that article. But, you know, for a snowboarder, if you're Cristiano Ronaldo, you've got a lot of money coming in at you from all these places. As a snowboarder, it's a much more smaller industry. You can still make quite good money, but you really need to provide value back to the brand. So I always really focused with Sage on how are you going to provide value back to the brand. It's great that you win an Olympic
Mm.
medal, The real value comes in if a kid runs up to you when you're snowboarding in Park City and is like, "Oh my God, it's Sage," that you get a pen out your pocket, you sign something, you give him some stickers, and you leave him really, really stoked on the exchange. And on the flip side, when you're on the podiums, etc., that you have the right branding on, that you are the representation of the brand. There's a reason that whenever you would see Tiger Woods on a Sunday, red shirt, swoosh, swoosh on the hat, all of the best athletes with Nike, it's very much by design what they're wearing. And Sage was like that. So, when he won the Olympics, we made sure that he had the goggles on. We made sure he had boots on that light up swooshes.
Yeah.
And every time he was on TV, he made sure he had the right product on. And he was a consummate professional in that regard. With Cristiano, we did a shoot with him in Madrid, and very, very professional. The difference between the snowboarding athletes, where you may get to travel and spend weeks on the road with them, with the football players, it's, you might get literally sort of 30 minutes with them. I think with Cristiano, we had him for 2 hours, and that was split between 4 different sets. He knows what it takes to keep everyone happy. So, come in, hair and makeup, get the clothes on, do what's needed, and he understands the role in that regard. He's not going to give you any minutes extra, and he's not going to be super animated, but he knows what it is to be professional, to turn up, to do what he needs to do. And I would say Erling similar, although Erling is a very, very fun personality. Like this guy is absolutely amazing because he has a very unique personality where it could be, me, you, my son. Like, he is just a guy who loves football. He loves everything about it, but he just so happens to be the best striker in the world right now. Again, similar, very, very professional. He knows what is needed. He knows what you have to do off the pitch, to satisfy all of the sponsor requirements. But he's another one, he has that inbuilt desire to win, which is unlike anything you see on the pitch at the moment. And that probably comes from the environment. His father was a Premier League player. His advisors have been Premier League players. It's if you have the right people around you in that regard, you will get to that level, I think.
Really, really interesting. So in total, I think you spent, I don't know, 10, 15 years already in the sports environment or sports brand. When did it stop for you that sport is just sport? Like, what I want to say is, like, you are also like a very sportive person, and now working with so many people in that environment, did the relationship to sports change?
Um, yeah, good question. With snowboarding, it did a little bit after. So when I moved to the US, I worked for the first 4 or 5 years for Nike, working on snowboarding, and so literally everything you do is revolving around snowboard boots, outerwear, snowboard athletes, everything, and it is like a childhood dream.
Mhm.
But when that chapter ended and we closed the snowboarding program, I definitely had a moment there where I thought, okay, I would like to not work on snowboarding for a while because I love it so much as a pastime. I don't want to become bitter against it. So I then had like a 5-6 year period without working on it, which was really good because you can then go back to why you fell in love with it in the first place.
Mhm.
I think that to me is the really, the great part of it.
Interesting. In general, like practicing it or also working in that kind of environment, what did it teach you along the way? Sports.
I think sports is very, very good for teaching you, I suppose, to not sweat the small stuff. What I mean by that is sometimes, like when we drive in the car, for example, my wife will freak out like, oh my God, there's a car coming and it's like half a kilometer away. Or sometimes someone at work will be like, oh, I can't believe what so-and-so has done. And with snowboarding, I mean, I had situations where, we got dropped off in helicopters on the top of mountains in Chile, seen avalanches. I've lost a few friends through snowboarding. and it teaches you that, work is just work. Like,
Mm.
it's not that big a deal. Like, if someone said something or sent the wrong email to this person, it really doesn't matter. Like, we will be fine. And I think that's what sport teaches you really well. It teaches you to be a good team player, good competitor. But ultimately, I think it gives you. It really means you're not going to sweat the small issues too much, which I think is good.
Summing up your experience at Nike,
Hmm.
um, from your point of from your point of view, what did it give to you, and what did it take from you? And you mentioned already that the decision to leave Nike was more about
Yeah.
maybe the competitive environment, right?
The decision to leave Nike was actually more of a personal choice because we were living in Portland through COVID,
Mhm.
and my wife is German, and we felt the time was right to move back to Europe to raise the kids. What it gave me, it's what it gave me was probably a second or third education. I mean, it's what you learn in a day-to-day work environment is unlike anything I've seen before. Um, so, for example, at Nike, they're very focused on when it comes to product. One of the five maxims was listen to the voice of the athlete. So when they make a product, listen to exactly the end user who you're going to make the product for, and make it for the very best athlete you can. So I think that was something I hadn't thought as much about before I joined. And then secondly, think about the consumer you're serving. So insights work, blind, like going shopping with them. I think those two things are areas which I maybe knew before, but I
Mm.
didn't really understand that well. Nike are very focused on listening to athletes, understanding consumers, like shopping behaviors, how they get influenced, et cetera, et cetera. And at Nike, that's like a fine art. Those two things. Um, it also, and I suppose ultimately, it teaches you as well to be, and people laugh at this, but it teaches you to be very good at documenting your work and recapping your work. And, I'm sure my team hate me for it, but every month we do like a recap of the last month.
Mm.
And that's what Nike are very good at. But ultimately, you're in the business of marketing. So you want to show people this is what we're achieving. This is where we're going. So I suppose that's what it gave to me. It was like a very good education. Um, what did it take from me? I don't think it took, I think the only thing it did to me was, again, the comparison thing. It's very easy to look at others and, yeah, feel that you're not doing enough. I think that was the one thing. Um, but it was also around the time that we'd had kids. So, you're not sleeping that much. You're you're trying to keep the lights on a little bit. So you're kind of, yeah, sometimes I think you have to kind of give yourself the carte blanche of like, okay, you're just in a difficult period in terms of life. So
I now close the chapter of Nike as well with this episode, and I'm super curious to know a bit more about the Anti Blueprint project. For
yeah.
anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's like this book.
Yes, look at this. Amazing.
Yeah, I bought it back then. I think during COVID, and
Yeah,
that's where the first time where I got in touch with you regarding
yeah,
that book. And I really love it because it shows stories from what's it, normal people,
yes, yeah,
and that's what also like what really resonates with me. What I'm also kind of trying to build with my community. To you don't have to be like a yeah super successful founder already with 6 figures income or have raised tons of money. And I would like to know what triggered the idea of the anti
yeah,
blueprint project.
yeah. Great. So first of all, thank you for supporting the project. So it started when we actually had an offsite, and my boss at the time, she was telling me a little bit about her family, and then she had a daughter who I think was 12 or 14 at the time, and she was going to a school in Portland. I think it was called Catlin Gable or something. Very prestigious school, high school in Portland. And I don't know much about, US education system. I've heard rumors, And so I was like, oh, so how much does it cost to go there? And she's like, oh, it's about 42,000 US a year. So I was like, so how long has she been there? And she's like, yeah, she's, I forget, a couple of years already, and she'll be there until she's whatever, 18, and then she'll go to college. And, I started doing the maths, and I was like, they're going to have spent probably 750 to $1 million on this girl by the time she's 21 in terms of education. And, in one regard, that's very, as a parent, I think it's very, it's great. I mean, if you want to set your kids up for the best possible chance of success. However, at the same time, I looked around my friend group, and I was just like, there's so many people I know who have amazing careers, who maybe went to university and then realized, okay, I'm studying the wrong thing, I want to change the degree, or they finished the degree and then went somewhere completely different, or they never even started a degree, and some hardly even got out of high school. And I just wanted to show, especially for teenage people and young people making their way in the world, you don't need, I don't think, I think especially as a European, I will say, you don't need to be obsessed with did you get to this school and did you do this and have you done that? And the pressure, because ultimately for a lot of us, when you get to sort of 21, 22 and you finish college, I know for me, I basically went snowboarding and traveling for about 3 years. And, we had to pay a little bit for my education. I worked during university to pay for a lot of it. But, if if my parents had spent $1 million and then I took 3 years to go snowboarding and get drunk around the world, they'd have been pretty disappointed, I think.
Yeah.
And my point is, I think that the way in the US especially that kids are expected to be, you've got to be the best at this. You've got to be, this grade by the time you're 10, and then you've got to get into this school. And then, you've got to get into one of the Ivy League colleges. And I found it crazy because there was a really good guy I worked with. He's now Colin Kaepernick's brand manager, an amazing guy, Gio. And he went to a college called Bowling Green, it was called. And I remember we were in like a meet and greet session and he announced where he went to college, and like other people were basically laughing. And I was like, dude, this guy's got a degree from a great university in the US. Just because it's not Harvard and Vail, like he's shown what he can do. And it's interesting because if you look at the statistics of the best educated kids in the world and the happiest, countries like Finland come out on top where they don't have any formal education until I think the age of 7. They have super short school days, I think, where they go to school for like 4 hours a day. And everything that you see in the US and the UK, it's like you've got to do more, you've got to get a tutor, you've got to do this, and if you don't, you'll fall behind. And yeah, again, I just think for a lot of the people that you see who've got very interesting careers, and again, this doesn't mean doctors and nurses and whoever, like I know you have to go down the appropriate path, but for a lot of other people, I just think the education system isn't really wired for them. So yeah, as I say, so I was looking around, saw a lot of friends who had interesting careers. So then I started calling a few of them and I was like, I think there's something here. And then because it was COVID, I just set up one-on-one Zooms like we're doing now, listened to them, asked them some questions for an hour. And then after like 6 months, I had all of this stuff and I didn't really know what to do with it. And a friend of mine said like, yeah, you should just make a book from it. And so we then, and this was just before AI, so you couldn't transcribe everything. So so I had to kind of like listen to it, type it out, and all the rest of it. And then I wrote some chapters to pull the whole thing together. So that was the story behind the whole project.
Did you ever thought about becoming a writer?
I used to write for a snowboard magazine, and I hadn't really written anything for probably 15 years. And to your question back about Nike of what did it take from you, there was one thing that I really struggled with at Nike, and that was you're either a brand marketeer or you're a creative. And so creative generally means, okay, what's the image going to be? What's the video going to be? And also in there, it was copywriting and writing. And because you're in the bucket of brand marketing, you're sort of told, well, you can't do anything creative because you sit on this side of the fence instead
Okay.
of here. And actually, I really loved writing. So I I think if I could tell you about my goal for sort of a few years from now, it would probably be to be a writer. I love the process. I love to be sort of alone with my thoughts. I love to research. I love to think about these challenges. And I think every now and then to sort of have those focus moments is really, really good.
What doubts came about or came along while you were writing? Anything I'm more thinking about, does it matter who I'm to do this or to
Yeah, I think that's always a question there. Like when you do something out of the ordinary, the what will my friends think about this? Um, and again, I think that's also a difference between the US and Europe because I feel like in the US, like Americans just like, yeah, good for you, go and do it. And in Europe, we're like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, come on. Or maybe it's just me or maybe it's British personality, but
No, no, I totally agree.
I definitely had a bit of that of like, why am I, is anyone going to care? Like, do I have a right to do this? I suppose
Yeah,
that was the first one.
yeah.
Second one was kind of like, okay, well, is anyone actually going to buy this thing? Like, is anyone going to? And a friend of mine suggested to do the guy who edited with me. He suggested to do Kickstarter, and then the guy who designed the whole thing, he's a lot more confident in my abilities than I am. So I was like, okay, we'll print like 100 copies, 500 copies, and he's like, no, we need like 1,500 copies. And then we did a crowdfund, and it worked really good. In the end, we sold like 2,500 copies, and it was yeah. But they were definitely the two doubts you have. But I think they're the same doubts that everyone has whenever you start a project.
Yeah. So you crowdfunded it, and then the people who like
Yeah.
donated
Yes.
got like one example.
Yeah, we did a Kickstarter with, I think we got 400 people or 400 copies sold on a Kickstarter,
Mhm.
which then meant that, and I put the amount that I needed slightly less than I did. So I put 10,000 euros, but I think I needed like 16,000 euros. But
Mhm.
I thought it's better to achieve the goal
Yeah.
and look very good. It's all marketing. So I beat the goal, which was great. We sold, I think, 300 or 400. Then the rest I sold ads on Instagram. I sold some to some stores, and then we actually did a reprint. So we did another 1,000 units. So it worked. It worked pretty good, considering. Well, yeah, I had no idea of how to sell a book before. So
Yeah. So the all the publishing and everything, your friends, took care of it, or
I had it's self-published. We used a printer in Innsbruck. So the guy who designed it, Sani Alababic, he's a very famous snowboarder. He designed it, but on the condition that we printed it in his favorite printer in Innsbruck. So beautiful quality of the first run, very expensive print quality. And then the second one we printed in the Czech Republic. Um, and I did look at, should I try and, I've had friends who've written books that have been published with Gestalten and other publishers. But the challenge when you do that, they want a lot of say about, the design of the book, the layout, what it's going to be called, everything else. And I was really like, hey, in my life, I might write one book. If I write one book, I want to do it on my terms, and I don't want to care about what someone else tells me to do. And I think that's the best way to do it, like just do it exactly how you would do it. So that was that was the kind of route that we took there.
was this project profitable or
I don't think so. In the end, I think in the end it was a wash. Um, I think if you could scale it and you could sell like 5 or 10,000 units, you could make it profitable. But it's interesting. There's two projects I've done in my life which have probably been the most important. One, I made a snowboard film like 20 years ago now. I
Mm.
made 3 snowboard films with some friends. I financed them. I got the sponsors, and I paid a filmer, and we did all this. I didn't make any money. I probably lost some money on it, but what it did, it showed people that I could do a project, and it showed people I knew how to organize things. And then the same for this book. Again, probably lost some money, but the connections that you get from it and the everything that you learn from it are way more valuable. So I'm a big believer sometimes in, if you have a feeling of a project you want to do, just do it and get on with it, because you will probably learn a lot more than you think you will.
Can you tell me a bit about the reactions of the people?
The people who bought the book, I think, is what's really I was really happy about, because I got so many messages. Obviously friends in the beginning, like very happy, da da da. The people who I don't know, that's what really excited me. So people, and I still get messages now, like 5 years later, who are like, "Oh, is there any more copies of this book? I bought it and I loved it and I wanted to gift it to a friend." And a lot of people who reached out, like, "I've been struggling with this in the past, and I read your book, and now I feel a lot better about things." And it's really like emotional a little bit, because when you realize that you can have an impact with people, you really are like, wow, that's why you do it. And again, it's only I must have had, I don't know, 50 messages like that, where you're really like, wow, like I've really impacted this person. So that, to me, again, that makes it worth doing, really worth doing. So
Looking back, did the writing change or shape your definition of success, especially with the Anti-Blue Blend project?
probably, yeah, probably a little, probably quite a bit, actually, because I realized through it there is a lot of people within my sphere who are very happy and content, who don't necessarily need to be the CEO of a company like Nike. One of my best friends he's not in the book, but when I make a second book, if I make one, he will definitely be in it. He works in Austria. In the winter, he works on the mountain. Like, he park safety, he shapes the snowboard park, and in the summer he works on the golf course, and he cuts the grass, and he makes the golf course great. He has enough money to work, to travel in the summer and go snowboarding and play golf, and he is the happiest man I think I know. And I always think about him, because it's like, as long as you have enough resources to live, we're only on this earth for a little while. So it's like, make the very, very best of it and enjoy every day. Like, whenever I'm with him, it's a good reminder to me of, hey, you know what? Like, enjoy today. You don't have to worry always about tomorrow. I think that's probably been one of the things that I learned through the book, and also just having changed a little bit reality from leaving Nike.
For you, having had all these kind of different experiences, what does a good life look for you now?
A good life. What does it look like? I actually made some notes to this one, because this is probably the hardest. Um, I think, yeah, first of all, being fit and healthy. If you get sick, if you hurt yourself, you really realize how much we take for
Yeah.
granted. Personal health and mental well-being, it's unbelievable. So I think that's the first one. Um, being with my family, helping them experience new things, traveling, etc. Um, and then when it comes to a good life, when it comes to professionally, working somewhere where you feel that you actually have an impact in an area that you seem to be talented. I think feeling that you have impact, working in an area where you have a natural talent for it,
Yeah.
that's the thing that generally I find like lights the fire a little bit.
The first thing you mentioned, I totally agree that also for me, like being active, doing sports,
Yeah.
try to stay healthy also mentally. I guess kids challenge, or it's quite maybe challenging when you have kids that you take that time to do those kind of things. I'm asking more out of curiosity, and also because I would be curious to know how did you manage that?
I think it is one. There was a really good. I saw an advert, and I keep trying to find this commercial. I can't find it, but it's one of the best adverts I've ever seen. And it was a video of like a mother or a father with kids, and the kids were like, "Hey, can you show me this thing? Can you show?" And the parent would always say, "Yes, let me just do this. Let me just do." it's unbelievable as a parent how many times a day you say that to your kids. Let me just do this other thing.
Yeah.
And all they really want is your help and your attention. But in the world we live, you've always got other things to do. And so a large part of, as I said earlier, we're not trying to use the phone on a Sunday or all of these things is trying to be more present for them. But I think ultimately the best way of doing it is to have passions that you can do together. So I taught both my kids to snowboard myself. And when you go snowboarding, there's no iPad, there's no Nintendo. There's just, okay, can we get from this point on the mountain to this point on the mountain? And then we get there and we'll have a hot chocolate. And then we can watch the Peace Basher or whatever it is. We're trying to do the same with surfing now. It's those moments when you're, and recently my son took an interest in running. So we're going to start trying to run because he's got a race coming up. Like, I think if you can do things together where you're doing something active together, I think that's, to me, the very best way to kind of spend that time and be present.
What still feels unfinished in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you said earlier, I think we all have those days where you're like, I'm still at the very beginning. And you feel like, oh, I haven't made any impact yet. I feel we all have those days. No, what is
Sorry to interrupt you here, but it's so surprising to hear that from you, like having worked in
no, but it goes
10,
back to
10
what
years at Nike and published a book and
yeah, but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like where you look. I had a conversation with Truls recently, the founder of DB. So he's got a brand which is 13 years old. It's got 80 employees. He, got investment from LVMH. He's done amazing things. And he was saying the same thing. He's like, oh yeah, but I'm not as good as the guy who started on. And it's like this curse we have where you always look upwards. And he's like, yeah, but On are doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but you're doing this. Look how great you're doing. No, I think in terms of unfinished things, I think for me, obviously professionally to try and do as well as I can for the company I'm working at goes without saying. Personally, writing would be a thing that I'm very passionate about, and I would love to continue writing, public speaking. I believe in this kind of area. So one, careers, journeys, where they take us, and then two, a bit like my Substack of brands that I find interesting. So I think that would be more on the personal side of what's left.
if everything you've built would disappear tomorrow, what would still give meaning to your life?
Probably, again, if I had enough money to do it, of course, but going snowboarding with my kids, going surfing with my kids, like very simple things. I think, yeah, sport is always the thing that gives meaning. So I think for me, that would be the thing.
Well, we have arrived almost at the end of our conversation. At least I don't have only 5 questions left.
Okay.
Will be the last ones. First question would be, what is for you the most valuable advice someone has given to you?
Most valuable advice. I've heard it in a few different ways, but it's a thing I heard very recently, and it was, don't let the urgent get in the way of the important. And it resonated, and it sums up a lot of my life. So I think that's one. Like, you can spend all your time doing small tasks, but make sure you get the important task done. Other advice, this came from a co-worker at Nike, Brian Craighill. He was very much, he always said to me, you don't need all the answers. Whatever you're doing, someone else has probably done it before. So, unless you're Elon Musk and you're trying to go to Mars or whatever he's doing tomorrow, most people have already done the work that you and I do. You can ask people and people will tell you some answers. I think that those are the two. And then if I could give one bit of advice to other people, it would be to learn how to speak in public. I think that's probably one of the most crucial things that anyone could ever learn to do.
Totally agree on that. What, on the other hand, second question, what is the worst advice you've ever been given or received?
Yeah, I thought about this question. I'm trying. I don't know if I have a specific example. Maybe I just block out the bad advice I've been given.
Yeah, no worries. And third question, what is something you're currently struggling with and something that even though most of the people wouldn't expect?
Yeah, I think it probably touches on a few subjects. I think I work well, we all seem to work a hybrid of home, work, office,
Mm,
and just making sure that we have enough time for actual deep work versus busy work. I think when it comes to professional is one of the most difficult things. I try to keep 2 days a week to actually do deep work, and I try to switch off notifications, and I really try.
yeah,
But I think that's probably for me and for many other people, that's probably one of the biggest challenges, the sort of information overload at the moment. Um, I think that's one of the main ones, and then yeah, I think the other one just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like not comparing yourself to other
mm,
people too much, and thinking about my friend who enjoys, you know, he enjoys his life to the maximum. I think that
yeah.
reminding myself to be like that and not be too hard on yourself.
Question number 4. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start their own project, write something meaningful, or take an unconventional path,
Yeah.
but feels paralyzed by doing it or by taking the first step?
It sounds a bit cliche, but just get started. It's it's very it's very easy. There's a saying in finance, like analysis paralysis.
Mm,
You can try and look at everything from every different angle and understand what will this person think and will it make money and will this thing happen. Ultimately, there's no way of knowing. You have to just start some things, and you might start 3 projects, and 2 of them might fail, and 1 of them might be a success. But ultimately, the best thing is just to get started. I think that's the way I look at it. And when you get started, remember that I have another friend. He gives me this advice all the time. I should have actually said this earlier, but um, he always says, like, no one cares what you're doing. Like, literally nobody else cares. And we all think, like, yeah, if you post on Instagram, I don't know, a 2-minute reel, you talking to the camera. And I remember when I made the Kickstarter video for the book, it was the first time I'd ever done like a, 2-minute reel on Instagram. And I was like,
mhm.
fuck, what are people going to think of me? And like, no one cares. They've all got their own stuff to do
Yeah,
anyway. So I think, yeah, just get started.
yeah.
Don't care what anyone thinks.
I like that because I call it like the spotlight effect. That's like,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody really cares, or at least not how we think
Everyone's
they
got
would.
their own they're dealing with.
Okay. The fifth and last question:
Mhm.
if someone is in that uncomfortable zone between good and great, what would be like the first real behavioral shift they should do?
Probably find some mentors, as we spoke about earlier, or a couple of friends. Like, find some people who aren't necessarily close friends and ask them for feedback, insights, and sort of honest dialogue about
Yeah.
what they're doing. I think, one problem, like with if it's your partner, you always want to be nice to them. You don't want to dress things up too much, and because you have a personal relationship, and sometimes at work, no one wants to be too nasty to each other. But at some point, I think finding people who are quite happy to give straight up input, they're probably going to be the ones who are going to help you to learn the most.
Yeah.
Um, and as I say, there's people who've done probably whatever you're trying to do before. And if you ask for help, it's amazing how many people will get on the phone with you and just say, "Yeah, for sure, I've got half an hour to chat." It's really interesting, and I think so many people are scared of doing that. And
Hmm.
yes, you might ask 10 people and 2 might get back to you, but then you can have 2 really good
Yeah, of
conversations.
course.
I think mentors is one of the best things.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your answer.
Pleasure.